plugged in here.
Oh, yeah? Okay. Reach it. There we go. That's probably been last night. Dr. Doug here with the KRB FM, the heart and soul of San Antonio. And we are here in the house with my good friend, San Antonio Mayor Ron Nirenberg. Ron, congratulations on the third term. You knocked the ball out of the park with the victory on May 5th. How does it feel?
Thank you, Doug. It feels real good to be back to work, not having to campaign through the month of May. And, you know, again, just to have the confidence of the voters of San Antonio to continue the work that we've been doing together as a community for the last couple of years,
right,
particularly through this pandemic. I think it's a vote of confidence in terms of the direction that we have taken the city, the work that we've been doing on equity, access to education and economic opportunity, and certainly putting the pandemic first and foremost behind us from a health standpoint, getting our community back healthy again.
So how are you doing with the vaccinations? We're pretty far along the way, huh?
We're doing really, really well. In fact, on Monday, you don't want to jinx it, but on Monday, I think we will be reporting that we will have vaccinated our 1,000,000th person.
Wow.
Here in Bexar County. Yeah, it's a big deal.
That's a big deal.
Yeah, and based on the number of or based on the eligible populations, which now are 12 and up, we have vaccinated with at least one dose, almost, I think about 60% of people, and almost half of our population eligible, 12 and up, have been fully vaccinated now. So it's a huge difference, and that's why we're seeing the numbers of infections and hospitalizations continue to plummet.
Wow, that's, I mean, Joe Biden would be proud of that.
He should be, because, you know, we've been working really hard here in our community to listen to our health professionals first, put politics aside, and work on, you know, getting folks healthy and eradicating this virus. And part of that has been, you know, the judge and I and our community banging on the table to get more vaccine to our community. But the ones that we have received, we've done very well in administering, and that's a credit to, you know, the health department, our hospitals, our doctors, clinics, pharmacies, our Veterans Administration. So everybody working hand in hand to make sure that we get folks to the best position possible to finally put this pandemic.
How are we doing with the homeless population?
You know, that is a continuing challenge, and it is a challenge across the nation because we've seen, again, the pandemic has stressed the inequities and challenges that we saw before the pandemic. And because of housing insecurity that existed prior to the pandemic, we've only seen homelessness become more of a challenge. But I will say that here in San Antonio, we have fared well relative, and that's because we've prioritized housing assistance. From the
Marley
very start.
has an apartment.
Good for
Marley
her.
has an apartment.
I'm
you guys don't know who Marley is, but she's the champion homeless person. She's probably one of the most educated and outspoken people, advocates for homeless, and she was herself homeless, and she just announced on Friday that she had an apartment. She sold her car, no longer living in her car, so that's a move in the right direction.
That's great to hear, Doug, and we want to hear more stories like that where we're getting previously homeless folks into permanent housing. And in many cases, that means permanent supportive housing. So one of the ways that we have been focused on a comprehensive homelessness relief, and not just moving it from one place to another, is working with folks who are experiencing homelessness on the root causes. You know, a lot of people think of homelessness as just not having a house, and that's just not the case. A lot of times it is a symptom of underlying issues, whether it's substance abuse, domestic violence, mental illness, things like that contribute to homelessness. And so we work with individuals where they are one-on-one to make sure that we eradicate those root causes, so that ultimately when they get into housing, it's permanent and it's supported and it leads to a thriving life.
I'm just so happy. You guys worked really hard to come up with solutions, and every time you came up with a solution, they come up with another problem. I don't mean they. I mean, another problem would arise. And it just seemed like in the past, government officials and people in your capacity what you know what? I tried to help them. They don't want the help, and they just turn a blind eye, and nothing changes. But you guys have worked really, really hard to find support and help for the homeless.
I'm thankful to be here in San Antonio where we do that, where we collaborate, and where we look at long-term permanent solutions. Too many times, and we know this in politics, people look for instant gratification,
Right.
a short-term fix that can get, a political point here and there. But we've been focused on the comprehensive solutions, and it's a credit not just to, the last a few years of folks working together in the homeless advocacy and nonprofit organizations and the city as well. But this San Antonio has been an exemplary model for how we address homelessness comprehensively for the better part of a decade, really. We're not done. We're not really close to done. There's a lot more to do. But some of the practices that we've been putting in place, including homeless outreach for the last 15 years. A lot of folks know Reverend Ron Brown.
Absolutely.
He's been doing an amazing job with that for a number of years when he was the prospect coordinator. But at any rate, San Antonio has been innovating. It has been working together. And as a result, a lot of cities look to San Antonio, what we're doing as models for how they can proceed with their homeless activity.
So, and one more thing about while we're on this homeless thing, Sarah is building that huge facility out there off of
Town Twin Village.
Town Twin Village. I'm going to go to when they have that groundbreaking thing. But so have they considered, or do you know if they've considered like resident services? Because
Yes.
now you're taking people and putting them into a place that's a strange environment for
Yeah.
them, and if they don't have the support.
That's the model, and it's more about those services than it is about even the roof.
Right.
And so Town Twin Village is a wonderful new development. It's supported by the city and the county and a nonprofit organization, our Housing First Coalition. It shows, and it's small homes mainly for the senior homeless population. But they're surrounded by a community of care with the services that they need to address underlying issues and also, work towards a permanent housing situation.
And I think that's going to work for that targeted population because, they didn't feel comfortable at Haven for Hope and those type of places, and they, some of them can't drive anymore. So this is a great solution you guys have put together.
Yeah, and Haven. So this is. Something that I think it's a concern because a lot of people are looking at our homelessness services paradigm, and they want us. A lot of people want one thing or another, one way of going about the homeless challenge or another. And there are advocates for housing first, and there are advocates for transitional housing, the kind of work that Haven for Hope is doing. And in my view, you need an array of services. You can't just rely on one method or another. There are certain members of the population that are going to respond better to different methods. And so in San Antonio, we have taken a hybrid approach. And the Town Twin Village is a good example of that. That is a housing first model in implementation. And it's not in place of Haven for Hope. It's in addition to. And so when you have a vast array of tools and methods to deal with the homelessness challenge, that's when you will be successful. That's why I think San Antonio has done well, is because we have tried and implemented all of the different methods available to address homelessness as a city.
Wow, that's awesome. So now I know. Oh, wow, we still got a lot of time left. So tell me, what do you? I know you've been bombarded with all kinds of stuff and a lot on your plate. But do you have an agenda? What would be your wish list or what's your goals for the third term?
Oh, absolutely. And let's be clear, the work of a community, the work of a mayor is not done in one term or 2 terms or 4 terms. It's us taking the ball as far down the field as possible and handing it off to the next folks. And that's what my intent is in the next 2 terms, God willing. So first and foremost, we got to put an end to this pandemic. We've got to make sure that we don't take any of our success for granted. We continue to work hard and eradicate this virus and put it behind us from a health standpoint. Second is we've got to focus on a full, robust economic recovery to ensure that people can get back to work safely and that businesses can get back on their feet. The third is to ensure that we have a continuing pipeline of healthy opportunities for our community. access to education, access to jobs and workforce training. That's going to set the stage for the future. If we can get back to a healthy population with a healthy economy and healthy opportunities, we will have the healthy future that we want. So in my view, what we are going to be facing over the next couple of years is the opportunity to have San Antonio's generational economic comeback. That's what I'll be focused on. There's going to be a lot of different components to it. Obviously, job training and job creation, getting folks into the workforce safely, into higher paying jobs is one major focus. We also have a generational New Deal type opportunity with the American Rescue Plan, the Potential Jobs Act, as well as our bond programs that are coming up with the city and the county, and the annual budgeting that we do. So how we prioritize those resources to build our city back better and more resilient, more equitable, I think is the task of the next few years. And if we play our cards right, we will create, again, an economic comeback, but also make San Antonio one of the strongest cities in America.
Well, I tell you what, you and the judge, the county and the city, you, the city council, and the commissioner's court, and that's not just the two of you, but the entire, all of you, have done, the 20 years that I've been here, I've never seen the county and the city have such a cohesive arrangement on almost every topic, and with this, with the Alamo colleges, the workforce, and the city, all of the opportunities that are there for free community college, the jobs. Talk about how that got started and how it's become so successful.
Well, it's deliberate, and I appreciate you saying that, Doug. It's a reflection of our community. San Antonio is a city of collaboration and teamwork. It's exemplified by our San Antonio Spurs, right?
That's right.
But
Timmy Duncan, I got my Tim Duncan. Oh, hold on.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, 2-1 Wake Forest.
Got my Tim Duncan jersey on. Congratulations, Tim.
San Antonio is a city of teamwork. That's how we thrive. That's how we've gotten through crises and challenges before. It is the earmark of America's defense and military city USA, but it's also how we've operated through the course of the last few years, and in particular during this pandemic, and it's been deliberate. That's why you've seen me and the judge on the air every day, is to exemplify that spirit, but also show that when we work together, we're stronger.
That's right.
We have we have resources to leverage that make their impact greater for the San Antonio community that we all serve. When it comes to resources to build infrastructure or to create services, essential services for our community, 1 + 1 = 3 many times.
That's right.
When you take these resources and leverage against each other and work together. So it's not often found in politics.
No, it's not.
But it is found in abundance here in San Antonio, and I'm grateful to have had the partnership with Judge Wolf, the council and the court working together in such a way. And we hope, and it is going to be our intent, to continue that collaboration long after we get out of this pandemic.
That's something you guys have done just a phenomenal job. All right, so we got a few minutes left here, so I'm gonna throw a couple. So I can throw a couple sliders at you.
Sure.
Okay. So you guys have done a great job. We've talked, first, part of the show about all of those things, and they're wonderful, and I know you guys are going to continue to do that. But as always, nothing's ever 100%. So we still have, these marginalized things out there. So first, I want to ask you about the whole. One thing that comes with economic development, and when it's kind of like a paradox. The poor communities, they want economic development, they want more resources, and et cetera. So, and it's not just here in San Antonio, it's across the entire country.
Yeah.
Whenever that happens, a lot of people who live in the community that wanted that development end up being forced out because of increased cost of housing and taxing. And how are we gonna affect it? Because it seems to me, I looked at some map the other day, there was something like another 300 and some odd properties that were bought up by some conglomerate that's going to do whatever they're going to do with them.
Yeah, and we've seen a lot of that outside investment purely on speculation that are driving up costs of housing and things like that now. Thankfully, it's not nearly what we're seeing in other cities, particularly Austin, but it's happening, and we can't deny that. So you're talking about gentrification.
Yes, sir.
And the bad effects of displacement that happen when properties are improved and property values go up surrounding it, that drive the costs up for people, for folks who are largely on fixed income and who can't afford, cannot absorb the impact of those taxes. And I'll start by saying first, not investing in your community, not improving public infrastructure, streets, sidewalks, drainage, parks, libraries, not doing that stuff is not the answer.
Right.
And we are in this situation where we've had communities disinvested in for generations, where we've had to deliberately turn back the clock and reverse that trend. And that's where we call, that's where we bring in the equity lens. And I'm very proud over the last 4 years since I've been mayor, we've instituted an equity framework in our budgeting process, so we invest in communities that have not had those right resources for generations. Largely, I would say, based on racist redlining policies of the past. But we have to rectify those inequities, and that's what we're doing. Unfortunately, in Texas, which has been rightly researched and is one of the most inequitably taxed states in the country, it's because we rely almost entirely on property taxes for our public services at the state level and even at the local level.
What human resource you have?
So we need tools to be able to improve the community, the public infrastructure, and also absorb the kind of private investment that occurs without impacting the most vulnerable members of our community. We've instituted at the local level senior exemptions, homestead exemptions, senior tax freezes, veterans exemptions, things like that. Those are the limits, statutory limits of our ability to create tools to help reduce the impact on vulnerable populations. We need the state, we need the legislature to step up and do things that some of our legislature have been already calling for years, things like a legacy homeowner exemption, in which, if you've been in your home for 20 years and somebody, a block down sells the house and creates a new, hotel or something with a large property value that you had no control over, but you're in your home, you've been paying a reasonable tax rate for years, and all of a sudden it goes through the roof. We need tools that require legislative action to help reduce that impact. I think that would be one big way of doing it. I think we also have to look at the other end of the ledger, or the other side of the ledger as well, and improve wages in this city.
Right. We
have been for too long a low-wage city, and we've marketed ourselves that way, and I think that has to end, or that has to change. And the way we do that is increase the educational attainment of our city, increase the economic mobility of our community, and that is why we're focused a lot of our efforts on breaking cycles of generational poverty through education and workforce development, the kind of things that you're seeing with the Train for Jobs SA program and Ready to Work SA that was voter approved back in November of 2020.
Awesome. So let's pick one more. Let's talk about policing. Prop B was not successful. So, I mean, how, what's going to be done to, and San Antonio is not as bad as many other cities. I mean, there are those who will say it's worse. Yeah. I don't believe that, but there's still, there's still a problem. And I mean, the culture of the police department and the officers that needs to be addressed.
Well, again, and Prop B did not pass, which means that our solutions are still at the collective bargaining table. And right now we're engaged in a good faith negotiation with the Police Officers Union, and it's based on the objectives that we've had as a community for years, since the previous contract, which I voted against because it did not achieve those reforms. We have to make sure that the police chief of SAPD has the ultimate hiring and firing decisions, and that officers who have been fired from the force are not able to gain their jobs back through a skewed process that doesn't allow the viewing of complete disciplinary records. So transparency and accountability are the objectives for our collective bargaining negotiation, and we simply cannot settle for anything less. And that's why I think the most important thing for folks to be clear about and to expect and hold our city council and me and everyone in the city accountable to is to achieve those objectives. They have been laid out again over the last several years of discussion, and then finally through our negotiating team. We can't move the goalposts. We have to stay true to the negotiating terms and achieve those terms. And if it comes back anything short of those reforms, we cannot support it.
That's good. That's good to know. I know it's a difficult, challenging thing, but I just, the things that have happened so far happened under a different Justice Department. I think if we have another incident in San Antonio, I think the Merrick Garland Justice Department could say, San Antonio, we're going to come down and we're going to see what happens. And if there's some kind of consent decree that's placed, that they would have those things would oversee, or will those things oversee the collective bargaining contract?
That's a question for the attorneys, but the Department of Justice oversees every department in the country. And so what we are also expecting is for some policing standards, a review of the policing procedures manual that was done in the Obama administration, 21st century policing,
right?
That, believe it or not, San Antonio Police Department and Chief McManus in particular were part of. We believe that there's probably going to be a revision of that soon, and expectations set on departments nationwide. I will tell you that over the last 6 months or so, more like 10 months, the police department has changed some of its own internal procedures because of the calls from the community, my office, and department leadership, a ban on chokeholds, a ban on no-knock warrants, ending practices that were part of some of the, I think people have heard of 8 Can't Wait.
Right, 8 Can't Wait. Right.
Yeah, things like
you got 4 of those already
prohibiting. So believe we're just about complete now, but one of those things was shooting at a moving vehicle.
Right.
Also changing the way calls for service related to mental health are responded to ensure that there are subject matter experts there and that we can de-escalate those calls and avoid confrontation. So there's a lot of things that have been done outside of the collective bargaining process that are more about policing procedures. The collective bargaining and the debate on Prop B, all of that was about accountability and transparency, and that's what we have to achieve, what we're required to achieve by state statute at the collective bargaining table, since we are still under 143 as a city.
Mayor Nirenberg, Ron, my buddy, my friend, dude, thank you so much for your time in studio. This is like the jumping over the broom or whatever. The pandemic is over and everybody's like doing a jig.
Yeah,
we're gonna have fiesta. So we're gonna get back to San Antonio.
It's good to see you in the flesh, Doug, and we're almost there. I don't want anybody to think the pandemic is completely over, though. If you have not gotten a vaccine, you got to get a vaccine. The closest you will get to seeing this pandemic be over is when you get your vaccine. Right. So go get it and encourage everybody you know to do it.
So I was telling them before, last thing, when I opened today, I told everyone, I said, I'm not going to ask someone to see their card. I'm not going to ask someone if they've had their shots. I'm just going to wear a mask, unless it's people that I know for sure have their shots, and those are just personal friends. I'm just wearing a mask.
Yeah. No, and it's a smart thing to do. I mean, if you want to be ultimately safe, wear a mask around people who you're not sure whether or not they're doing it. The good news is that the CDC has said that if you have been vaccinated, it's very low likelihood that you can pick up and transmit the virus. So folks who don't want to wear a mask and refuse to get vaccinated are taking their health largely in their own hands. And
there are still people that are getting infected. There was one who I know very closely, a 32-year-old, was in the hospital for 2 weeks. So. Yeah. The Honorable Ron Nirenberg, Mayor of San Antonio, is back for a 3rd term, back on the Dr. Doug Saturday show in the house. Thanks, Ron.
It's great to see you, Doug.
Great to see you, too. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.